Hi, welcome to my channel FarazDev. In this video, I will show you how you can use exception in PHP in order to make your code better. So this is a simple PHP script that contains these three functions. The first function is used to calculate the sum of two integers. The second function is used to square a value of an integer, and the third function displays the value of an integer. Okay, so let's say we have two integers a and b, and their values are 4 and 3 respectively. First of all, we calculate their sum, and the answer will be stored in this variable. Then this sum will be provided to this function as value, and it will be squared by this function, and finally display integer function will display the value of the final value. Okay, so let's try to run this and see in the browser. We see the result 49. It's working good, but what if we do not have these variables defined? Because this is a simple script, we already know that these variables are defined and we know it very well. But in a real world application, there are some variables that we might not know if it is undefined or null or something else. So in order to tackle this scenario, we need to handle the errors and exceptions, etc. Let's try to run this function. You see the result is 0, but according to this function, we should not get any value. We should get an error that these numbers are undefined. So let's see how we can improve this code. I will write a little better approach for this time, and then I will improve it further using PHP exceptions. So each of our functions should validate its arguments. And first of all, let's make this calculate sum of two integers function better. So there could be different scenarios, like the variable a is not defined. If that is the case, if its value is null, we should return an error. A should have an integer value. Or let's make it more clear, a should not be null. Similarly, this a should also be an integer, because the function name is calculate the sum of two integers. So this a should be an integer. In order to do this, we will use is int function. If it is not an integer, should be, if it is not an integer, we should return an error displaying that a should have an integer value. Okay, the same goes for the variable b as well. We'll copy it and paste it here. Let's replace these values. Alright, so this function is much better than it was before. And similarly, this calculates the scale of integer. This function should also receive an integer value. If it is not an integer value, or if it is a null, it should display an error. So we have made the function a little better. Let's try to run it. As you can see, integer a should have an integer value. So this is the error that we are getting right now. Okay, so in order to address this scenario, in order to get this scenario, and that the final message is not very helpful for us. We should either get an integer value as a result, or we should get this error, but not the both in the okay. So let's make it better. After this function we can write an if condition. If sum is an integer, only then run this function, because otherwise this is not useful and this is also not useful. If the sum is not if the sum is not an integer, we should display the error message, which is stored into the sum variable. I am telling again, this is not a very good approach, because ideally this calculates sum of two integer function. This should return an integer value. Okay, so this is what that is expected from this function, but in this case this is returning a string with an error message. So this is not a good approach, but I'm just trying to explain how this is going to work if we are not going to use exceptions in our case. Okay, let's refresh the page. So we are now getting the error that a should not be null. So we have tackled the first problem with that approach. Okay, again let's say we define a and try to run it, and then it displays that b should not be null. If we try to do this, then we are getting the results. Okay, one more thing, let's convert it into a string and try to refresh the page. Then again it presents us with an error saying that b should have an integer value. Okay, so we can do it in this way to make our code better. But what if this function, just like calculate sum of two integers, this calculate scale of an integer also has the similar structure. Either it returns an integer value or it returns an error message, which is a string. So in order to make our code foolproof, we will have to place another check here. If is int scale, and then display integer, otherwise echo the scale. So this is only three functions in our, there are only three functions in our script, and we have seen that our code has become clunky. It is not a very good approach. So we need approach that makes our code clean, and it is very easy to extend or enhance. It should be flexible. So let's start using exceptions in PHP and make our code better. So I'm going to convert it now. Let's erase this, all of this for now, so that we are back into our initial stage. Okay, so we will still have these checks, but what I will do is I will throw an exception, new exception. Okay, so the new exception can receive several parameters, but the first parameter can be this error message that we want to display. So I will convert all of these messages like this. Okay, and I'm replacing all of this. Done. Okay, similarly we will do the same for the calculate scale of integer function. So we have used the exception in our function, but how do we make use of this exception thing in our code? Really? So we need to have two blocks, try and catch block. The catch block receives exception as the parameter, and we will place all of our code in this try block. If an error occurs in any of these functions, if an error occurs in any of these functions, then the execution of the code will be transferred to this block immediately. For example, if this sum function has raised an exception, then immediately our code execution will be transferred to this block, and it will skip these two lines in our case. So that is the advantage of exception. We can skip the block, a particular block, and shift the execution of the code to another block immediately on the base of an error. That is the advantage here. Let's try to yeah, and in this catch block we can display the error message, just like echo exception, and exception has a method which is get message. Okay, let's try to run this code. We should have an integer value. We are getting this error message. So do you see, we do not have if and else etc., and our code is much clearer now. Let's try to make it value 3. It should work fine. And if I make it null, it should present us with an error. Similarly, and let's make both of these as null, and we will get an error. So this is a very better approach now. Okay, so you can also create custom exception or custom functionality, and that will be exactly the next video, in which I will show you how you can create custom exceptions to make your code even better. I hope you liked my video. If that is the case, please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon as to receive the notifications of my new videos. Until then, take care. Bye bye.